Okay, hey everybody, I want to go over the first lab with you guys in this video. So let's see, we'll first, well, I've created the repository in GitHub. We'll go out there and look at how to create a repository. Um, then we'll clone the repository down to our local machine. Then we will create a new project inside of that repository folder, add some code for lab one. So I'll go over connections with outlets and actions. Then we'll commit and push that project up to our GitHub repository. Okay, so let's first jump out to GitHub, and I need to backtrack a little bit because I created a repository. So let me create a new one. Okay, so let's see, we'll create a new repository. So I'm at my GitHub dashboard here, and I'm going to click New, and we don't need to use a template. I'll call this IT 2100 Spring 2021. We'll share class files for IT 2100. I'll make mine private, but if you could make your lab repository private, and then click add a README file and create a repository. So this creates the base repository. Hopefully you guys have done this for other classes or for work or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to go now. I can either from the repository, I could copy the path here, or I can just go to the URL, the address bar, and copy the path here. So basically, this is all we need is to copy the path. If you're not familiar with GitHub much, one easy way to keep things clean is don't change anything in GitHub.com or anywhere else except for your development machine, and then you won't have any sync issues. If you do change stuff in GitHub.com, you need to pull it down. If you've changed stuff in both places, then we need to run a sync. And if you need to synchronize the file, so if you need help with that, just let me know. It's not hard at all, but if the first few times you do it, it's a little confusing. Okay, so I'm on my local machine. Let me get to the top here. And I just created a folder for my class files. I would not normally store them on desktop, but I'm just doing it as a demo here for the class. So I've got a folder called classes. Note that you don't need to create a folder for IT 2100 because when you clone down the repository, it's going to create a folder on your machine with the same name as the repository that you have in github.com. So for mine, it's going to create a folder called IT 2100 when I do the clone. Okay, so the command is just git clone. I hope you can see it. Oh, I forget how to change the font here. So we change the font size a little. Or maybe can I just zoom in? I need to be in the classroom with you guys so you can help me through this. Okay. Okay, there we are. Okay, so I'm gonna run the command git clone, and I'm gonna paste in the path. Hope you're still with me after all that. So the command is git clone, and then the path to my repository. I'm gonna hit enter, and you'll see it cloning. It might prompt you for a username and password if you haven't used GitHub. I'm assuming you guys have used GitHub for other classes, so I'm skipping a little bit of this. But if you need to set the username and password and you can't get past that, just let me know. So what do I have now? Well, now I'm inside the classes folder, and I've got a folder called IT 2100 Spring 2021. That folder, IT 2100 Spring 2021, is your repository. So all of your labs for the semester or any projects you want to save to GitHub now, you're going to create inside of that folder. If I jump into that folder, you can see that it's got this .git directory with all the Git settings for publishing or pushing your projects up to github.com. So now we can just jump into Xcode and be done. If you want to use the command prompt, I like to use the command prompt to push files. I think you can see a little more verbose messages, easier, kind of in one place there, and run all the commands without any GUI controls over it. But um, at this point, if you want, we can just jump into Xcode, and you can use Xcode to commit and push all of your files. So I'm going to go into Xcode now. I'm going to create a new. So I have Xcode open, new project. Okay, and we're going to create this project as an app. I'm going to select that and click Next. And I'm going to call the project Lab1, a joke. I'm just putting that 0, 1 so that if we have 15 labs or whatever, it'll organize, it'll sort 0, 1 through 0, 9 before 10. So get the project name. You should see your login. The organization identifier is the domain backwards. I put IT in there just for fun as a subdomain. Note that dashes are not allowed in the organization identifier, so I took out the dash. Our interface is storyboard for now. At the end of the semester, we'll come back and create some Swift UI projects just to play with that. And the language at the moment is Swift. An older language that Apple used just a few years back is Objective-C. Make sure use core data is unchecked. When it hurt it, but it just adds some unnecessary files there. I'm going to leave include tests checked, although we probably won't use them this week. So I'm going to jump into, see, right now I'm in this classes folder. I'm going to jump into that IT 2100 Spring 2021 folder. This is the folder that was created when we did the clone. And notice Xcode is kind of smart about source control. It knows now that we're inside of a Git repository because of that .git file. So now we're not able to actually create a repository as we're creating the project. It knows there's already one in this repository. It knows this is a local GitHub repository. So I'm going to click Create now. And now we've created our project. So at this point, we could commit and push our initial source code. Let's do that just for fun. So I'm going to, in order to commit and push from Xcode, I'm going to go to source control, commit, and see all those files. It's adding those automatically. Some IDEs don't do the add automatically, but Xcode's nice. Whenever you add a file, it does the git add for you. So I'm just going to say created lab1, and I'm going to check this push to remote. So now it's doing a commit and a push for us. And as soon as this message clears, I'm going to jump over to my GitHub repository and click on the repository to refresh it. And now you'll see lab1 a joke. So in the end, what you should see is all of your labs listed here, lab 1 through lab 15 or whatever it is. Okay, so back in Xcode now, let's take a look at this. So here we have our project navigator. I'm going to just close these up. We're not going to do the test right now. So at first here we have all the project settings. And let's jump into the two files we want to look at right now. So we've got our main.storyboard, and this provides a way for us to visually lay out our app. Here you can see the view controller scene is defining what's going to be on the screen at one time, and it's all laid out within a view, which is controlled by source code in a view controller class. So if we click on the storyboard, and select one of the view controllers, if you come over here to the identity inspector, you can actually change the class that it's configured to use. So this is a view controller class, and we can actually change this to a custom view controller class. This is just the initial one that was set up for us. And if you go to the view controller class, this is Swift's way of inheriting. So you can see we've got this, the name of the class is view controller, which is a UI view controller class. All right. So we want to add some GUI objects to our storyboard now. So we're going to go up to this Show Library button up in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to click on that, and we're going to add a label. And let's just configure that label really quick. So we're going to jump over to the Attributes Inspector, and we're going to put a joke in here. So this will be like maybe a few lines long. So I'm going to make it 3 lines. I want it to change in size, so I'm going to, I'll check automatically adjust font size, and instead of having a set font size or fixed font size, I'm going to change it to a minimum font size. I'll just make it really small. I'll make it 0.2. I'm going to expand the width of the label so it takes up most of the viewable area. And Xcode uses this nice grid system. You can see when it's centered perfectly, it shows that grid line that goes, it spans the entire view. And I'll resize it to a few lines there. And then also I'll center it, and maybe I'll change the font size to a 20. I'm going to need another label. I'm going to actually, below this, let's add a button. So UI button object, I'll add it right below it. And I'm going to resize that as well. And I will change this to show joke. I'm going to change this. I'm just going to double click on it. You can jump over here and change it in the Attributes Inspector as well. I'm just going to change it on the view in the storyboard. So I'll just put joke. And I like the properties and everything set up, so I'm just going to copy this label below, and I'm going to copy the button as well. And I'm going to change this one to punchline, and this one to show punchline. Okay, so we've got a label. This will show our joke. We've got a punchline that'll show the punchline. Really simple app. We're just going to display some messages on it. So when we click show joke, it'll display the joke here. When we click show punchline, it'll display the punchline here. When we start off with no, we're not going to check to see if the joke was displayed or anything like that. I'm just keeping it really simple. So in order for, using UIKit, in order for us to interact with these GUI elements, we need to create connections. So we need to actually explicitly connect each of these objects to our view controller. And we do that with what's called connectors. And there are 2 types of connectors. So there is an outlet and there is an action. And an outlet is used for a property, and an action is used to define a function. So if you have some code that you want to run. So I'm going to create an outlet for each of the labels. So I'll call this joke label, and it is type UI label. And we'll talk about some of this stuff, some of the code specifics next week. I'll call this one punchline label, and we'll specify the type. And then we create actions we define as functions. So basically this at IB outlet and at IB action are really just marking what would normally be a normal property of the class or a normal function of the class. It's just marking them so that Xcode knows to connect them. Basically, it just allows this class to see the object in memory. So we get this real-time presentation on the phone of the screen, and this class, when this code is running, it can see where that is in memory. So we've got a show joke function and show punchline. Okay, so we've got 4 connectors. We have an outlet for joke label. We have an outlet for punchline label, and those will represent the UI label objects that are in our view. And then we've got 2 functions, and these are event-driven functions that'll fire when we click on the button. Okay, so in order then to use these outlets and actions, we actually need to go over to our storyboard, and we need to connect them. So we're going to go to the view, and I'm going to hold down Control, or you can just use the right mouse button if you have a 2-button mouse, and I'm going to drag it to joke. No, take that back. I'm sorry, we're going to go from our view controller. This is a little brain fart there. And we're going to see a list of all of our outlets. So for joke, we want to use joke label. So I'm going to click on joke label. Then we want to connect our punchline label. So I'm going to hold down the Control key, and I'm going to click on view controller. I'm going to left drag over to punchline, and now you can see the punchline label. And the function is slightly different because when think about it this way, from the view controller, we want to access the joke label. Right, it controls what happens with the joke label. But with our button, we want to invoke something inside the view controller when we press the button. So I'm going to hold down the Control key and go from the button over to the view controller. And then you can see all these things. So these segues, that's how we would jump to another view controller or another view that we created in our storyboard. Then we've got these methods, and these are these functions that we've created. So I'm going to click on the show joke, and then if I click on show punchline, I'm going to again Control and drag that over to view controller, not view. And now we're going to select show punchline. So now we have these wired up to our view controller, and you can check those. You can click on the view controller class to open it in the editor. Or you can just click on the view controller here. A third way is you can use this little GUI element that selects the view controller. And then up here, I'm going to go over to the properties window, and I'm going to click on show the connections inspector. And the connections inspector shows all of our connections. So here's our outlet. Joke label is the property in our class. Joke space label is actually the name, pretty bad name, but it's the name that I gave the element on the GUI. So I'm gonna click on view controller, and I'm gonna go over to this connections inspector, and I can see a list of all of my connections that have been made. So joke label, punchline label, and then I've got these 2 actions that are set up as well. Okay, so basically, if we ran it now, nothing would happen. So I'm going to go ahead and run very slowly. So we should see our joke and punchline. I'm not going to worry about the layout right now. I didn't dock it correctly, but right now, nothing happens. And that's because our function doesn't do anything. So let's jump back over to here, and I'm just going to do this real quick. I'm going to go to the size inspector, And you can see right now that it's just docked to the left side of the viewable area. I'm going to click this so that it expands the size. It's an auto resizing mask. We'll talk about how to format our app later on, but for now, this is a really easy way. It'll just resize it so it stays in the middle, and then this docks each element to the top. Okay, so back in our view controller now, let's go ahead and add our joke. So we can access the label, so we'll say joke label dot, and text is the property that we want to set. So I'm going to set the joke label text property to some value. So I'm just going to write joke. And then I'll have a punchline. So the punchline label dot text so now what's going to happen is when we run that action, the function that's associated with that action, it's going to just set the label to some new text. So we're going to go ahead and run it now. And you'll see it just changes the messages. So what's the important thing? Well, the important thing is just to be able to use the library, add visual elements to your view. We'll play around more and more with laying out the elements. That's one of the trickier parts, I think, using UIKit with apps. We'll do more and more of that as we go. Really try to create a lot of connections this week. That's one of the most basic and most important things that you're going to do. So create more actions, create more outlets and more actions, and try to make sure that you can use the storyboard, click the view controller, view the connections inspector, and make sure that you can understand where all of those connections are set up. Go into your code and create the code for the function and the action. So that's basically lab one. So now I'm done, but I still need to make sure it goes to GitHub. So I'm going to go to source control and click commit. Completed lab one. I'm going to push to remote. I'm going to click commit 3 files and push. And I always go out and check my code. So I'm going to go out here. I'm going to go into the lab 1 folder. Here's my view controller source code, and I just want to make sure that the functions have that text being set. And I'm going to go back now to the root of my repository. I'm going to select the URL, and let's just go to Blackboard. I'll submit this one so you can see what I'm talking about with the adding this as a comment. Okay, so when we are in the lesson 1 folder, assuming all of you have taken another class with Blackboard, so you're not submitted Blackboard, we just go into this lab 1. And there's a area to attach files. I don't want you to attach files. If you prefer, you can click Write Submission, but you can just go, I think the easiest way is just go into the comments and paste in your URL. Now, if you had some other question you wanted to ask me, or you wanted to tell me something, like I struggled with adding the action. So I'm not sure if it's correct or not. Make sure that you separate it. It makes it difficult if sometimes students will put things together and not use punctuation, and just make it easy for me to find that URL. So basically what I'm going to do is go out to your repository, or what I might do is set up all of your repositories and clone them to my machine. And then I can write a script and just have them automatically pull from your repository so that I can open up your code in Xcode. I'm sure for later labs I'll do that. So make sure you get your repository set up, get the book. The book's important this semester. Make sure that you are able to get the actions and outlets connected, and add some objects from the library. If you finish early, the exercise on creating an array is a great one. I'm going to create an array later in the week. I'll post that late this week so that you can see how to transform this joke app so that it shows multiple jokes. So if you get done, try that one on your own. This first one's good, just to go step by step, just as you're getting familiar with Xcode and using GitHub. So make sure you get all that done early, so that if you have questions, you can ask me early, so that next week we hit the ground running in Xcode. We won't have a lot of time to cover Swift on its own, so we're kind of going to learn Swift as we go, which I know is going to be a difficult challenge for us this semester. But I think we can do it. Swift is a pretty simplified language, and it's should be familiar with given the other languages that you've learned. So all right, good luck with the first week, and let me know how it goes. Thanks.